Hello and welcome to the Families Embracing Diversity Conference. We are so glad to have you here with us this morning. Today I am here with two special guests. First up we have Hi I'm who is here. She's here to tell us about Little Bean's Toy Chest. Hi, how are you doing this morning?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you.
And I just have to acknowledge the fact that it's super early and I greatly appreciate that you are here with us this morning. What time is it for you? 7 a.m.?
It's 7 a.m. Yes, my kids are still sleeping.
I can imagine. Just
Yes.
for fun, if you're joining live, let us know what time it is for you, just to see where everybody's at around the world. Do you want to take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about yourself and about Little Bean's Toy Chest?
Hi, yes. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be in this forum with you all. And my name is Hai Anh Vũ, and I am a mom of two girls who are biracial, half Asian and half American, and also owner of this brand called Little Beans Toy Chest. So our main products are a special kind of toy called toy books that you can play with and at the same time learn different things for little children. The books are very whole handmade and featuring different cultures and people um, from different backgrounds. So the books are all handmade by people in Vietnam and supporting the social enterprises and people who are in underprivileged situations to help them with their employment and livelihoods. So I was inspired to make these books first in order to have more representations of people from different cultures for children to see. So these books feature all these little dolls in the books that are multicultural, and that helps for children to see that, you know, if they want to have some dolls that look like themselves, they can find them in these books. So those are the main ideas for our books. Yeah, and I will pop the website in the chat.
Actually,
So you can
just
watch.
did.
Yeah,
So
awesome.
people can check it
Thank
out.
you.
And Hyan is going to be the co-host of this session. So that means that she and Mia will be having a conversation about how to stand up to racism in your community and your schools. And I will be off screen in the chat monitoring any questions and popping up any questions you might have throughout the session into the video. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Mia in. Hi, Mia.
Hello.
Just for fun, what time is it where you're at? Is it
I think I got the long end of the stick, 10 a.m.
10 a.m.? Yeah, me too. I was hoping it wasn't too early for you. So here we have Mia Winden. She is going to share with us about a situation where she was able to stand up to racism in her community and her schools. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. You'll notice a theme. So 2009, I started blogging. My blog is pragmaticmom.com. It's on parenting and education, but there's a whole lot of diverse children's books on it. And then about 2 years after that, I started a nonprofit. It's around diverse children's books. It's called Read Your World Celebrates Multicultural Children's Book Day. So we're rebranding, so we're using our hashtag. And we basically give away diverse children's books to readers, adults, teachers, librarians, kids. And now these days, we're really fighting against the whole banned books situation. But we also produce sort of like resources to help everyone find and use diverse books. So you'll find classroom kits and lists to find what you need. I also host a multicultural picture book club, and that is the first Thursday of every month. It's free and virtual, and it's 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we have one coming up. We're actually going to be using Holding On by Sophia Lee and Isabel Rojas, and we'll be celebrating. Oh, here we go. We'll be celebrating May's Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and this book is a Filipino-themed book, but also about memory loss and multi-generational relationships. So I'm super excited about that. And then sort of like I guess spending all these years working to make the children's book industry more amenable to making diverse stories available, I sort of pried the door open a little bit and then decided to walk through it. So my debut picture book came out in 2019. I had entered the Lee and Low New Voices competition, and I didn't win, which is I always tell kids at classroom visits, I didn't win, but I got an offer for editorial help. And then I wrote a book for Scholastic, also Asian Pacific. And then I decided to do a Kickstarter book. And this is very similar to this one, but it's about Asian Pacific American female athletes, because I have 2 daughters and a son, and my middle daughter in high school said, "Mom, there's no Asian American female athletes at all." And I was like, "Chloe Kim, you like her?" And she was like, "She's the only one." And I was like, "No, I know there's more." And of course there are. Most of them have Olympic gold medals, but nobody knows about them. And then I have another, my call it my sophomore picture book. So Food for the Future is about sustainable farms around the world, and it's published with Barefoot Books, and it's coming out in 1 month. I have a few more books. So this one, which was the Kickstarter book, is finally, actually, after years of trying, got sold to Scholastic. So they're going to release it in June, and through their book fair and through their flyers. So yeah, that's a lot of diverse books. I'll be, I guess, is my theme.
That's amazing. So many exciting things. Where can people find out about your virtual book club and all of your books? On your website?
Yeah, I'll have everything on pragmaticmom.com is probably or if you subscribe to my blog, you'll like I'll constantly announcing like what's to come.
Okay, I will make sure that link is in the chat. Thank you for that. I will hop out so you guys can start the conversation then.
Hi, Mia. Let's talk about the time that your high school decided to put on an anti-Asian play. Can you tell us a little bit about the backstory and what did you do about it?
Sure. So it was about 8 years ago. My oldest was about to enter high school. And so I was just at like a fundraiser at the high school, because they do this, like they do this like travel abroad for high school students. And they were doing a fundraiser to raise scholarship money for it. And so I sat at a table with like, kind of like a friend of mine and then a friend of hers who I knew a little bit, but not that well. And she was telling me like, oh, her son is half Chinese, half Caucasian. So she was saying, it's too bad my son is a theater kid and he sings, and he's a senior, and they have this play, a musical, and he'd be perfect for it. In fact, they wanted to give him a part, like a main part, but he said, "No, I can't do it because, my Chinese grandparents come, and if they saw this play, they would be so ashamed. It would be embarrassing to them, and I can't put my grandparents through that." And I was like, "What? Like, what's this play? I've never, I'm not like a theater person. I'm not like a musical theater person." And she's like, "It's called Thoroughly Modern Millie." And she said, it's like those old musicals. A lot of them are super racist. And I was like, "Did you do anything?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, I wrote a letter to the head of the theater program saying, please don't choose this play. It's very racist." And, crickets, like crickets. And, she's a longtime theater mom. And I was like, "What?" And it's literally like next week this play is going on, you know what I mean? And my high school puts on like 11 to 13 performances a year. Like we have 2 theaters, and the theater program is very robust, and they put on like amazing, amazing performances. Like kids are so talented. So, so I'm blogging at the time on Pragmatic Mom, which is like, sort of like my main blog, but I have like this micro blog I live in Newton, which is 7 miles west of Boston. And it's just called ilovenewton.com. It's like this micro blog, just stuff going on in Newton. So I decided I'm going to put it there. Like, like what the heck? I mean, like basically Thoroughly Modern Millie is a super racist play. And why are they doing it in Newton, my community, with like an 11%, Asian population? so I put it up, and like, it's a micro blog, so I don't really expect much. And then I'm starting to get responses, like some very strong, hate comments, and then like some supporting comments. And so it's starting to get a little heated, you know what I mean? And so I decide that, okay, you know, um, because I lay out all, I do all this research. I lay out all the points of why this is a super racist play. There's like yellowface, and I have to explain blackface is not okay. So why do you think yellowface is okay? Because these comments are like, yellowface is no big deal. And it's like, excuse me, like, how do you justify that? Do you think blackface is fine? And they were like, no, blackface is not fine. So then why, so there's many, many wrinkles to why there's many, many layers of why this play is racist. It's an old play, musical. And so I decided, like, okay, now you're making me mad. So I start going, like, multiple blog posts and putting it all over social media, and I ended up devoting like a month, an entire month, every spare minute of free time I had, I was gonna promote why this play. And the play's already, the play's going because it's like 2 days before opening. I
Mm,
go and I watch the play. I tape part of the racist pieces of it.
mm,
And now, like, just on social media, like, I'm tagging like Angry Asian Man, and he includes it in one of his blog post roundup. Ra and I'm tagging every Asian organization. And then what do you know? Boston Globe reporter reaches out to me like, "Hey, I've been
mm,
following this. Do you have something to say?" Like, "Oh, I have a lot to say." So, front page of the Boston Globe, you know, which then gets, more reaction, so, like, more comments. So I'm writing more blog posts, and then there's more articles in the Boston Globe. There ends up being, like, 4 of them, not all front page, but, and then it sort of, like, ripples, and all of a sudden it's across the pond in
mm,
UK, in, like, their largest newspaper. And so what is the result? The result is the high school decides to hold, like, a public forum to discuss it, um, and, you know, they're kinda hostile about it, truth be told, but then it's, like, weird how just from putting it out there. So then I'm getting support from Chinese American alumni that went to Newton North and moved away, but are in the Asian American space to say, like, no, no, because like, what is so weird is that Newton is a very liberal town,
mm,
like Massachusetts is liberal, and Newton is extremely well educated and liberal. It's we're sort of the town that came out of Cambridge like 200 years ago, and
mhm,
like in my like down the street from me, there's houses that are purported to have been stops on the Underground Railroad. Our Newton Museum is showcasing how it was a stop in the Underground Railroad. I mean, so we have a long history of ethnic diversity. Like, we were
mhm,
we were the area, if you were a middle class, freed slave, if you escaped slavery and you made it to Boston, and then you were like a fine, like, woodworker, and you were
mm,
successful, like, you would buy a house in Martha's Vineyard, kind of where Obama, like, has a
mhm,
house now, and then you would live in Newton because it was the only place in all of Massachusetts and all of Boston, if you were an affluent person of color, that you were allowed to live there, you
mm,
know? So we have this long history. But we also have hidden above this sort of, shiny surface, we also have racism, And
mhm,
so, and this is 8 years ago, before Trump was even running for office. And it was just under the surface, like, you didn't see it, you didn't notice it. But for example, like, going back to the enslavement and how we had this really, thriving community in a particular area of Newton when they built the Mass Pike, like, in the 70s. You know how when you build a highway, part of it has to be straight because they use it for, like, a runway in an emergency, and then part of it can be curved. and it's like certain increments, straight, curved, whatever. So I don't know who did it, but when they planned the Mass Pike, they deliberately curved it to wipe out that middle class African American community.
Hmm.
Some of it remains, and it's abutted right against the Mass Pike. And anyway, our town had like a haiku thing where they're like, "Oh, submit haikus," and we're gonna put it on signs all over town. So I wrote one about wiping out, yeah, which might not have been the Newton people, might have been, in Boston, and
Hmm.
it was not chosen. But so this whole, racism in our high school. Like, we have, like a 13% Asian American student population, and those kids are being asked like, "Hey, like, why are you so upset? Like what's the big deal? It's
Hmm.
funny. Like, what's the big so they're sort of under the spotlight, and then my friend's son who declined to be in the park, they're like, is this all your fault?" I mean, it was sort of like a
Uncomfortable.
microcosm of, like, when you bring up racism, you know, like, um, like, what happens, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many defenders of this play saying,
Mhm.
"Lighten up, it's no big deal." And even my own, like, Asian American in my own community, I reached out to, people that I know whose kids go to that high school or are in the community that feeds into that high school that are Asian or have biracial kids to say, like, I'm getting a lot of hate on my blog. Could you like leave a comment of support, even anonymously? And um, and it was strange to me. Like, I had a lot of support from a complete stranger who said like she's a Jewish woman, and then my own friends are like, we'd rather take you out to dinner to say thank you, but we can't leave a comment even anonymously because one, like, oh, I saw the play at another school and haha, I thought it was funny, and it was like, um, your kids are half Chinese. This is like an anti-Chinese play, in some versions of it, because this play is used in high schools across the country for, you know, for decades. They will
Mhm.
actually use the whole like, like racist hat and like, like hair braid,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
they didn't do that in my high school, but they literally like there's examples of that I found. And then other people would say like, like their kids are in the theater. They're like, well, can't you like Mia, can't you look at it as like comedy, like the yellow faced woman? She's such a like villain. Isn't that funny? And I was like, no, it's not, it's racist.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
other people will be like, we just can't make waves, like it might affect my husband's job, like you could do it another like, no, we just like we'd rather take you out to dinner to say thank you. And so it's like, like you think like the Asians in your community would stand shoulder to shoulder with you. Um, like I just assumed like these were my friends. These are my friends. These continue to be my friends. Like not
Mhm.
necessarily, you know what I mean? Because anything that's too controversial, I think just Asians as a culture, we're like we're like trying so hard to assimilate and fit in. And
And
so
make
to point
peace.
out, yeah, to say like I'm not okay with this. And then with so many other people so aggressively attacking you, white people, that it's intimidating to put yourself forward, And so
Mhm.
I think it was like the Jewish woman who I've never even met, like I don't even know her, coming from a place of I know persecution. So
Mhm.
I'm going to stand up for you even though this is not my personal battle, but I
Mhm.
understand it's like it's for all of us who've ever been persecuted or faced racism. So it was so interesting to me, like who comes forward and who like steps back. And
Mhm.
I felt
Yeah.
like you just needed one other person to like be like, no, like I'm standing and like that's enough.
Mhm. Yeah. That is such an inspiring story, and thank you for being so courageous, for standing up to that. Even I think 10 years ago, 8 years ago, or your story was what 13 years ago, right? That
No, it was
was
about 8 years ago.
8 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the well that. that was during Obama time, right? But
Yes,
that was
yes.
still that the climate was still very different in terms of the thoughts around Asian hate and all that, and around racism and all that. Can you
Hello.
pass
Yes,
it
it seemed like, okay, Obama's president, so racism isn't a thing. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like,
Why did you leave
Asians.
the credit for that right in my room?
I'm sorry, honey.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay. And I think there was this whole prevalent idea of like Asians as like the model minority. Like, why are you complaining? Asians, like in my high school, like Asians, like you get into all the good schools. You know what I mean? Like what, like, like why are you complaining? But it's interesting because the neighboring town, which is Brookline, it's like literally like, well, we have a lot of but it's literally the neighboring town, um, towards Boston, and it has an even higher percentage of Asians, and they actually did the same musical play at basically the same time, because they always do musicals in the spring. But
Mm-hmm.
on their own, without anyone complaining, they decided, "We're just gonna rewrite it, and we're gonna
Mm-hmm.
take it out of this setting," where like, the 2 of the main characters are these 2 Chinese men who are very subservient in the
Mm-hmm.
play. We're gonna rewrite it completely, and we're gonna set it in the Deep South. So, like, there's no, Asian ethnicity specific, racism around, like, there's gonna be no yellow face, for example. And they
Mm-hmm.
just did it on their own. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
my high school, when they're like, "Well, why didn't you just, do what Brookline High School did?" And they're like, "Well, we would never change the words of a play, like
It's too
we're
sacred.
such like, like musical theater scholars, we would never without permission." But then they literally, because they couldn't cast the 2 Asian parts,
Mm.
because that one, my friend's son, they just assumed he would take it. And when he refused, then they went to the Asian American club on campus. And those kids, 1, they're not really theater kids, and 2, they're kind of like, um,
Yeah.
no,
No.
why would we do an Asian, racist, So they had to cast a white boy in the
That's
part,
even
and
even worse.
he's playing a Chinese character, and
Mhm.
they're not putting him in yellowface, although another character is in yellowface. And so at the very end, they have to rewrite it, and they have to make up a new character, which is the mother they add at the very end, who like hobbles on stage and says, "Ha ha, you never realized, but you're adopted." Like, they totally did rewrite it.
Yeah. 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 So your comments were very interesting about having someone to support you. Just one person can support you and make you feel more empowered to keep going. My question is for you next is if all of us adults or kids who see something uncomfortable like that but do not have such a big platform like you, or writing a lot of blogs or doing a lot of things already on that, what can they do? How should they start addressing that uncomfortable feelings or voicing their concerns, and discomfort around racism or things that they perceive as not right?
Yeah, and first thing I would say is like I literally use my microblog, which like has like maybe like 30 subscribe. I mean, it's tiny. So
Mm,
I would say like you don't even necessarily need a blog, because like these days, even 8 years later, if someone just put it on Nextdoor or even on a Facebook page, you know what I mean? So I think there's more ways to have your voice be public. Although, you can also, if you're uncomfortable with that, even just writing into the school. So my
mhm.
friend wrote to like the director of the theater, and she probably CC'd the principal. But I mean, like, just to have, I would say, like, some, um, paper trail, to say, like, "I wrote about it, and here's the paper trail," and so that at least in the future, you can say, like, "I notified you guys, why didn't you do anything?" If they say, like, "Oh, no one said anything," it's like, "Well, here's the paper trail," you know?
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
and I think I think it's just, um, 1, just to actually do that, you know what I mean? To have some kind of formal complaint, that's public or private, but something that's traceable. And I mean, and that's no small thing, because you have to like decide I'm going to do that, make the time, write it, send it, and worry like maybe there's repercussions. For me, I'm like, we're not even at this high school. Like I have 3 kids, and my oldest is about to enter, and that could be bad. You know what I mean? Because while she's not a theater person, the head of the creative art, the performing art, the head of it is performing arts and creative arts. And my daughter's definitely an artist. Like she's going there for art, and subsequently went to Rhode Island School of Design. I mean, she was, and so like there could have been repercussions, to punish the family who's kicking up the fuss. So those are definitely things to be concerned about, like, and I didn't suffer from that, but I could have, and I could see why a parent would be worried about it, because that is true and that could happen. So I would say, there's probably ways that you can find to have voice that fit your comfort level, whether it's like a letter that you send anonymously or with your name, or posting something publicly with your name or anonymously, or even just asking for a meeting with someone, because a lot of times just a face-to-face discussion um, is it's just a better form of communication, because even like a written format, people are interpreting what you are saying, what you mean, what your emotional level is, they're interpreting. So especially like emails, when they go back and forth, it like the emotion, the tone can escalate quite
Yeah.
like, or just like on my blog with comments, the tone can escalate quite rapidly, whereas face to face, it's it's a little bit more dramatic when it escalates, and there's a little bit more room to try to come to like a common, perspective. Like, and I'm personally not that good at it. I'm good at saying I'm super pissed off, and here's all the evidence of why I am correct and I am right and you are wrong. That's not necessarily the best way to go.
I think maybe sorry.
No, it's probably like I just like I'm still learning. So I was reading about like, the best way to go is actually 45% listening. And in the beginning, you let the person say what they want to say, and then you repeat it back as like, I am hearing you say that you chose this play, not thinking it was racist, but because it provided a lot of parts, like there's just a lot of parts, so you can cast a lot of people, because the musical is the most popular show of the year and everyone wants to participate, and a lot of the musicals don't have like 30 parts, so so you were thinking inclusion because you can have 30 people cast, and that you were thinking it's fine because people have been using this play for like whatever 50 years, and you had no idea like there was any controversy, but in retrospect, you realize that the vetting system that you have, which is 3 layers of vetting, has no people of color. So maybe that's where you went wrong. You have diversity in terms of like minority representation, but there's no people of color, and certainly no Asians, and certainly no Chinese Americans.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, because a lot of times it's not like they intentionally are being racist, but it's unknowingly, and just out of habit or out of revering traditions and things like you say, that they didn't take another perspective. So that's something that we can point out in a more reconciliatory way, instead of attacking them as being the bad guy, or being malicious in their intent. So I think that could be a way.
That's definitely the better way.
Yeah.
I did not necessarily do that, but that's the better way. And in hindsight, I would recommend that. But also, it was just like I didn't find out about it until 2 days before they were to go live. So, and there were other people who were notifying them, well before. So yeah, it's a combination, because sometimes you can do the reconciliatory, like nice way, and if the machine's already moving, it might they're like, it's too much work or it's too hard. So
Yeah.
then you have to kick up a fuss. But what's so
Yeah.
interesting is like 8 years later, like this year, the spring musical, a different performance happened, and they decided to do something for the first time that was only BIPOC. Because also, if you think about it, a lot of these old musicals, they're the way
Oh,
you have
right.
to cast it, all the main parts are white, like almost
Mhm.
unless you do like a different interpretation of it, all the parts are white, because that's the unless it was built in like thoroughly modern Millie, where there's some BIPOC, but it's like, it's written in a racist way, but most of
Mm.
them in general, the leads are white or the whole play is white. And so they decided they're gonna do all BIPOC, and not just BIPOC for the sake of it, but like to dive into minority stories. In the
Mhm.
same way, like now in the children's book world, we're trying to dive into minority stories to say they're they should be mainstream, and these story, we're not just one big chunk, we're not just one Asian American, Asian Pacific, like we're all, 30 plus
Diverse.
cultures or
Yeah.
more, and
Yeah.
we all have different stories even within one ethnic group. And
Mhm.
every story is valid and should be told. So they were sort of coming from that perspective. Let's do this play around
Mhm.
ethnic
Mhm.
stories. And then they got pushback of like, I don't I don't know if it's necessarily from my community, but they got pushback, public pushback to say like, um, how dare you have a play where white people's kids cannot be the star of it, you know?
Mhm.
And same thing, like it, the part of the whole like banned book people, like they go viral, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
that ended up in a story across the pond as well. And
Mhm.
and 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 kudos to the principal, who is a different principal. He's also a Black principal who does a lot of diversity, and inclusion work. He literally has written books about it, and he held firm, and they did the play, and I'm sure it was amazing. But
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
so interesting that one, I think, even to be thinking about that was that my like the community as a whole, like listened and heard and learned and moved forward, and where they were willing to do something like that. So like kudos to them for learning the takeaway. Like
Mhm.
minority stories are important, and if you tell
Mm.
them all in a racist way, it's not
Yeah.
good for anybody.
Yeah.
But then to know that there's always going to be pushback, because it's kind of like this white mindset is that you know we're the majority, even though it's no longer going to be true, and certainly not true in certain states like California.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
that it's like this mindset of like, we can never be excluded. Like we have
Mm.
to have always all the opportunities. We
Mm.
have to always be the star, or the ability to be the star. We will
Mhm.
we will not tolerate ever being excluded.
Mm.
Whereas we don't mind ever excluding you, minority people. That's the world in which it should be. But if
Mm.
the tables are ever turned, whether it's in my community or elsewhere, the the pushback is quite, you know, quite intense. And
Mm.
I think that's something to be learned from for BIPOCs, to say like, they don't hesitate when they're um, like not in a position to have, you know, the lion's share. And
Mm.
so we have to be equally, front and
Yeah.
center and forward to say like, hey, this is affecting us, and like we're not getting that opportunity. And I
Mhm.
think as a group, Asian Pacific Americans, we haven't been, just because we've faced racism in its ugliest form, in its most intense historically, for hundreds of years, of like not being allowed to get citizenship as a naturalized citizen, not being allowed to own property, not, you know what I mean, not being allowed like jobs. Like my mother, who's a Japanese American citizen born in San Francisco, after World War II, she became a civil servant. And her brother, who served in, the 442nd, division in Europe as the
Mm.
Japanese American, infantry
Yeah.
unit.
Yeah.
And it was like never like civil servant, like what's the big deal? Like it's not even that great of a job, but it's like no one of color was allowed to be a civil servant until
Mm.
after World War II, and if you think about it, like, now that I'm learning about it, that meant, like, learning to fly a plane as part of the Air Force or becoming a nurse as part of the military and getting that training for free, which otherwise is not available to you. So they
Yeah.
were definitely like middle class opportunities that were denied, just
Mhm.
across the board, anyone of
Yeah.
color. And it's not that long ago. It's not
Mhm.
that long ago. And now
Mm.
we have more invisible barriers where we're,
Mm.
we're not like literally it was a law, like you're not allowed to be a civil servant.
Yeah.
But if we don't fight for it, people, nobody's fighting for you. Nobody is.
Yeah, and that's a story, that's a lesson also that we need to teach our children, right? Because
Yes.
yeah, and that like how to fight for themselves. I would like to ask another question, but I don't know if we are running out of time because I think we have other speakers. So
We have about 10 minutes. So I think
okay.
we can fit. I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment. So I think we can fit that one in and then we will have to call it a day.
So I wanted to segue into asking Mia what actions, how do we prepare our kids to stand up against racism, and or if they see anything, it notice racism at school or elsewhere, how do they take actions? Um, and I think one of the things I take from you is leading by example, right? Your kids, I'm sure, are very vocal, and I don't know what are the
I
things
mean,
that they do?
I think they were a little bit embarrassed. Like, you know what I mean? And they're like, we're not even at the high school yet, mom. Like, what the hell are you doing? But
Mm.
I think it's really to take a step back and say, like, um, what kind of kids are we trying to raise? And for me, like the one thing I focused on was confident kids. Like we have to make sure our kids are confident,
Mhm.
and have, good self-esteem, because so many things, um, like you can avoid so many problems if your kids are confident and have good self-esteem. Um,
Mm.
like they won't be victims of bullying, for example, because if you're just a confident child, and so you think like what makes a kid confident? Um, for me, like like I'm all about sports. I feel like kids that do sports, girls that do sports, it's so important for girls, for body image and just for them to know like my body is like it's like a athletic machine. It's not here to be judged on its physical, what I
Mm.
mean?
Mhm.
Like the physical presentation. It's my body is, it's an instrument that accomplishes things.
Mhm.
But also just to, um, I guess, to support them and their interests, and for them just to, you know what I mean, to feel like, um, I can do whatever I want. Like it's okay if I don't do a lot of play. I mean, it's for them to feel like I am enough. You know what I mean? Like I don't need to be this or that. I don't need to have lots of play dates. I don't, whatever it is. Like I I know who I am. I pursue things I'm interested in. I know I'm enough. I know I'm a cool person. You know what I mean? Like, and for my son, like, like my kids and I, we've all done hand-to-hand combat sports for a really long time. And I
Mm.
feel too like that also just gives you physical confidence. Like
Mhm.
my son's was really small for his age, like
Mm.
one entire head shorter than all the kids, even though he was among the oldest of, because of his birthday, he was among the oldest of his cohort for every grade,
Amazing.
but he was one head, like 12 inches smaller. But because, like, he literally was doing hand-to-hand combat and played a lot of sports, when one little kid challenged him to fight, like literally playground fight, um, like, he was like, "Okay, let's go." And then I was there watching, but I didn't even hear him, and he was like, "Why wouldn't I fight this kid?" He was like, "Mom, I've been training as a boxer for years. Like, I know how to punch." And he was like, that kid just like slunk away as soon as I was like,
Mhm.
"Okay, let's go."
Yeah.
And when he was very little in preschool, he was being bullied like unintentionally, just like this kid was just like didn't know what he was doing. And the convention is like, oh, just like, don't do anything. But we were like, no, if the kid pushes you, push him back. You know what I mean? Because that's like the playground. Like that's not what parents say, but like that's what I say. The kid pushed him back, but like a little bit harder. And so I literally was on deck because I was like the parent volunteer, and I saw this kid push and they're literally the same size. And then my son was like, "What?" And then he like for the first time after being like whacked with a 2x4 and like stepped on, he pushed him back, and the kid looked surprised because the kid was an only child, and then he was like, "Oh, yeah, no, that doesn't feel good." And then they just ran off and played, and then there was never any physical bullying after that. So, you know,
Yeah. I think I wonder if that kind of confidence also helps them to be more courageous in pushing things out of boundary, or pushing themselves into more uncomfortable situations where, as you say, sometimes when you voice something against racism or against things that you think are unjust, you become unpopular, or you become a target. um, and I think that, as you say, cultivating their confidence will help a lot with helping them to have that courage, right? That
I think 100% because
Mhm,
like it's how you feel inside, you know.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. That is beautiful.
I hate that we have to end this conversation because there's so much great advice and so
Mhm.
just a wealth of knowledge coming from you, Mia. Thank you so much for sharing. But unfortunately, we do have to end it so that we can start the next session. If people want to continue the conversation, if they want to keep talking to you about these things, where can they find you, Mia? I know we talked about
Yeah.
at the beginning, but there are new people in here.
Pragmaticmom.com, and I'll if you like subscribe to my blog, you'll get all the notifications of the virtual picture book club and any kind of anything else. It's like it's all there.
And there's also Multicultural Children's Book Day. Will that change the URL?
We're rebranding it to readyourworld.org, but right now it repoints to multiculturalchildrensbookday.com, so both will work.
Okay.
But I also will list like when we're doing stuff, I'll put it on my blog as well. I'll give you announcements, like because right now actually we're running an auction, our first virtual auction. It goes live on May 1st and it runs for until the 15th. And there's like 2 more days if anyone wants to donate anything. Like, hi on if you want to donate like one of your beautiful storybooks.
Cool.
If you just go to multiculturalchildrensbookday.com,
Mhm.
there's a link to donate anything you want, and that will be thrilled to promote it as well.
Perfect. All
Thank
right.
you.
And if you want to find more about Little Bean's Toy Chest, you can go here to find that. And all of those links are in the description of this video, and they're also in the clickable schedule that everyone has in their emails. So thank you both so very much for being here, and thank you to everyone who's joining us. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one to talk about how to nurture a sense of belonging in kids. So we will see you soon at 11.
Thank you. Thank you.